Hi, I'm Alice Hoffmann, an indie comic artist from Austria, and in today's video it's time for another Paintover critique. This artwork was submitted by MarrHero. Thanks a lot. Let's have a look. For this Paintover I'll show you the progress in the software itself, because this way it might be easier to see the changes and how they work. Yeah, first of all, I made a new layer which just changes the saturation, and since it is gray, it basically grays out everything. And I'd say whenever I look at the image, my focus goes to this area, and a little bit this one, which is not ideal because you want to have the viewer look at those two characters. So I'll try to find a few ways to change this. First and foremost, composition-wise, I think it would be good to avoid certain tangents. For example, the characters bump into some background objects, and here's a certain line. It might have been on purpose, but I think it looks a bit too perfectly lined up with them. I'll just separate the characters from the background. These character selections are certainly not perfect, but they'll do for the demonstration. I'll fill the background because I will move the characters around, and it would look a bit weird if there are the old character bits and pieces back there. Okay, rather than the characters, I think I'll edit the background. So as I said, here the tangent, it feels a little bit, it aligns too well with the shoulders, I think. It still leads upwards to the character if the hill, ascends there, but you don't have to have it completely perfectly in place. And this one, it was a little bit too horizontal, I felt, and it destroyed the dynamic feeling you had for the other hills, which is a bit of a pity, I'd say. So then we still have this shadow. I'd say remove it. In general, these shadows might serve you better if they follow the shape of the hills more. Like this, for example, because it looks like the light is coming from here. So yeah, I'd say this one needs a bit more shadow here. This one, let's just say it also gets the same treatment. Overall, maybe it would have been good to have the whole image be in a landscape format, because you are already making use of the scene and the background landscape. So yeah, the format would make sense, and it also would be practical if you want to ever print the image or sell prints on demand on platforms. Usually they don't really have such a nearly square format. So this would be worth consideration, I'd say. So then let's have a look at the characters themselves. What you can do here is exaggerate their acting. So this teacher character might have more of a regal pose. So chest outwards. So this was just a very quick little liquify change. Do you see what I mean? So it seems like she's putting her chest out more, being a good example for the student. Because this is kind of the pose that she wants to see from the student, I'd say. So, then the student. So overall, pretty good. I'd say the feet are a little bit small. So I'll just stretch them out a little bit. Basically, you'll want the feet to be a little bit bigger than the hands. Otherwise, they feel very tiny. So, maybe like this. Yeah, the same for the teacher, basically. Yeah, I think this will do. Okay, I'll try one more thing for the composition. So, the student's hand was meeting this pillar before. And I think it looks a little bit better if there's some distance. So let's compare it a bit. See, here it was completely in the cross section. I think they can even move a little bit more. So now they are basically in the center of this frame. So overall we still have the problem of the focus. So this can be changed with the lighting and the basic overall values. One little trick I'll use is making the foreground characters a little bit darker overall. This won't stay like this, don't worry. I'm changing this layers mode to multiply and then experiment a little bit. So this could be the basic darkness. Then I can make a mask and erase the parts that I don't really need. So basically everything where the light hits. Then we can also darken the foreground objects that are in the shadow with the same treatment. And now that I moved the characters, of course the shadow on the ground isn't correct anymore. So I'll fix that as well. So, as you can see, now the overall contrast of the foreground objects is a little bit more distinctive from the background. So before it was a little bit hard to make out what the main objects are. What can also be done on the background is adding more blue over the hills, which will make them seem like they are far away. Of course, you won't want to go all the way, but make it very subtle and just experiment with the level of blueness you want. I think something like this might work. And what you could try as well, if you want to have a typical animation look, is painting the background. So not making any line art. So, and this is easier to do if you have brushes that work well for this type of art. So whatever software you are using, there is probably a set of brushes that is prepared specifically for backgrounds, for example, or foliage even, so that you don't have to think of the shapes all the time. It can be very efficient. This is just the outlines of the hills, but we can compare it to before. So if you have lines everywhere, then all objects look kinda important. We can use a little trick to make the characters stand out some more. They are the very most important part of the image, so I'd say adding an extra thick outline just outside is a good idea. Of course, some artists like having all the lines very fine, so yeah, you will have to make a decision here, what you want most, if it is the clear focus or if it's the very fine lines. But I think that having thicker outlines is just such a big advantage for the clarity of your image. So yeah, I really recommend it. By the way, I think it's cool that you have these two characters interact, because most people don't really try drawing multiple characters in one scene. So all they usually do is like a pin-up drawing of one character. And yeah, of course, then you never get the exercise that you need to have characters interact, and then it stays difficult. So yeah, good that you just tried doing this. And it works very well. So the outlines I'm adding are very unified, and of course it could be more interesting to have them with varying line weight, but I'm just trying to make a quick change, so please forgive me. But yeah, if you do want to add this change to your style, then you can experiment with different line thicknesses or maybe even textured brushes. Yeah, let's just have a look at that. So here's a textured brush, a random one. It is a subtle difference, but I think it adds a little more interest. You see? Yeah, but since I started with the smooth one, I'll use this for the rest as well. So, okay, let's compare it. I think it makes the character stand out a lot more. And it doesn't have to be this extreme. Yeah, I made it a little thick, but it's just for demonstration purposes. Yeah, since we are talking about the line art anyway, what you can do on the background layer is use thinner lines in comparison. I'm just changing it for this pillar object. Optionally, just as I mentioned with the background, you can also paint these objects and not have them have any lines. It's a very different process, and it takes, yeah, if you've never done it, it takes a while until you've until it's just as easy as working with line art, but it's worth a try, because the aesthetic is very pleasing and it makes the characters stand out so much more. So, okay, this is a very quick and sloppy change, but we can see the difference now. I think it all adds up in the end. Okay, then next up, let's have a look at the colors, how they can be adjusted a bit more. So the light color could be very distinctly yellow and bright. I'm just very sloppily adding stuff on top now, just to show off some layer modes and how they can work. In your own artwork you might want to do this more precisely, of course, please. So add is very simple. It makes the colors overall brighter. Overlay can oftentimes work nicely, and it keeps more of the color hue. So in this case I'll keep this, and I will blend out the edges of these lights. So this is already a little bit like a glare, but I want more of this type of light. So I'm working with a very soft brush and low density. In this case it might be best to just keep it on normal and maybe erase it where it gets in the way of making the character's features distinguishable. But I would say overall it adds a lot of mood. See? You can also try adding them in the background, but I wouldn't overdo it because the characters should look most important. But it's really satisfying to just throw those little glows on top. What you might also want to try is have one of the light layers be on a different layer mode, and then combining those two, because it's very satisfying to have crisp contrast. Okay, so now overall the characters should be standing out more, but I want to do one last thing, and that is adding vignettes. So vignettes can sometimes work like a sort of frame for the image, and they aren't necessarily 100% realistic, but still, it just works so nicely for images. And I might be even overdoing it now, but you will see the effect. And of course, for your own work, you can always turn it down a little bit more and have it be subtle. Let's look at it again in the Grayscale version. So without the vignette and with the vignette. It really makes us turn our eyes on the characters. We are not looking in this left corner anymore. So I generally recommend them, if they are working with your images, to just try them. You can always throw them away if they don't work. It doesn't cost much. I just noticed one thing in the background, and this is very nitpicky, but you have this very intricate pattern here for the stones everywhere, and here they are suddenly very straight. So what you can do in this case, when you run out of stamina to draw all these intricate patterns, is just copy stuff and maybe, you know, rotate it a bit and call it a day, because no one will notice usually. So it's not a good idea that I picked the one from just over there, but you know, you can edit it a little bit and then no one will care, basically notice it. So let's say if you pick a little color from up there and put it there and maybe combine the shapes and then make new lines. Yeah, okay, this is a sloppy example, but you know what I mean. You don't have to draw all these details all the time. Really make use of the digital media and all the copy and pasting and editing tools, because the time you save with this over, I don't know, years is probably a lot. Okay, so let's compare the original with the Paintover once more. So, I hope it helps, and even if you don't decide to use these tips, now you have the option to. It's always better to know an option and not use it than to not know it. And if any of you out there want to submit another artwork as well for a future Paintover critique, yeah, I would be very pleased, because I want to do this format like once a month. And for it to work, I just need submissions, because yeah, obviously I can also do Paintover critiques for myself, but it's just not the same thing, and it is just so much fun helping people out. So yeah, feel free to DM me on any of my platforms or email me. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. Bye!